Great. Well, that's close enough. Hi, everybody. Today we're coming together for a sort of a different purpose. After 26 years, uh, I wrote a new book. It's called Becoming the Instrument Lessons on Self. I have to read it myself. Lessons on Self Mastery from Music to Life. So basically, what this is, I'm sure a lot of you had read Effortless Mastery, and I know the reaction to it, and I know how much it has been a help to people. This really expands it in kind of concentric circles until it relates to more and more things that anyone might want to apply it to. Where the original idea of Effortless Mastery was helping musicians get out of their own way, practice better, play better. I would get all this feedback from people saying, well, I tried it and I had a neighbor. I remember one of the first times this happened. A neighbor knew nothing about music, knew nothing about this stuff when we were living in Jersey. And he said to me, man, what's happening with your book? I read your book. And he said, I really enjoyed it. But today I shot the best golf of my life. And I went, oh, wow, that's cool, you know? And I got more and more letters. I still get emails from that book today, uh, even from a few soldiers, from seminary schools. It turns out that lessons that one can learn in music could be as instrumental and as helpful and as useful if someone can translate them. And I believe this book translates them for any issue in your life. It's about how much freedom you can become comfortable with within yourself. We've had a period, undoubtedly, of restriction and quarantine. And what I found is an excellent opportunity to test the limitlessness of the inner environment. The outer environment has been limited for most of us the first time in our lives. I don't think there's anybody on here that was around for the Spanish flu. And yet, that makes it the best time to explore the inner environment. And that environment is limitless, and there's never a reason to limit it except egoistic fears, like I might be foolish, I might not play well, I might not be respected, I might not be liked. And these kind of things in the conscious mind, as people know from Effortless Mastery, have only had limiting effects on people. So we have done exercises to expand our arrogance, our inner arrogance, to expand our ability to just go for it and not have failure be something that restricts us. So when failure is celebrated equally with success, then there is no failure. Because the worst thing about failure is the feeling of it. In this book, which is 26 years later, I've had many opportunities, mainly being the artistic director of the Effortless Mastery Institute. And that alone is quite amazing. We have an Effortless Mastery Institute at Berklee School of Music, College of Music in Boston. And there's even a minor in Effortless Mastery, which has quite amazed me what it's all come to. And since I've been teaching it as semesters, and basically as I try to make it as available to anyone that's at school, but it really kind of is limited to the people that go to Berklee. And I feel like this book is a way for other people to practice this kind of freedom within their own life. So there's a couple of things that come that you have to drop in order to experience this freedom. You have to drop the need to sound good as a person or as a musician. You have to drop the need to judge your own expression, which mutes it terribly. You have to drop the need to succeed. But it's a trick statement because everybody can say to themselves, whenever they, even for a moment, were not oppressed by the need to succeed, they suddenly were succeeding. So that's kind of the human nature thing that unites us all. That Effortless Mastery correctly identified, and this book really expands it to almost anything that a person can be or anything that a person can be thinking about. So the other night when I did a presentation on it, I started with just something. There's a chapter in Becoming the Instrument called, excuse me, the perfect instrument, and I'm just going to read a short paragraph from it. The perfect instrument requires the physical, emotional, neurological, psychological, and spiritual components in a human being to be in alignment. And that's really what this book is about. There's a lot of reference to all of that. And since I wrote Effortless Mastery, there's so much more science to support the idea that everything, even revelation perhaps, is neurological. The sense that you could be overtaken with epiphany may be nothing more than a certain lighting of the brain. But the point is, how do we rehearse our own greatness? How do we practice it without consequences? How do we get used to that root in our mind so that when we are doing something that we do think is important, has consequences, and we can't let go? But if we've been practicing the act of letting go in a inconsequential way, it may be available to us as a new neurological pattern when it's time to perform. And when I say perform, that's why this is very different. This is about performing in the boardroom. This is about a middle level manager. This is about a CEO. This is about a scientist. This is about a biochemist. This is about a computer programmer, because our brains all work the same way. When you get to the point where failure can almost be celebrated, all there is success. And you get so much further, whether you're practicing a science or a music or a sport. If failure doesn't deter you, you keep working at it. But in the conscious mind, the failure may say to you, oh, I'm never going to get this, or it's going to take 10 years before I get this. All these things are in the realm of the conscious mind. That was what was covered in Effortless Mastery. And now the Effortless Mastery Institute is about removing these messages between ourselves and the greatness that is available. I think in the first book, I pointed out that there was a very popular phrase: there are those who have it and those who don't. And Effortless Mastery posits, as does many things, everybody has it. There are those of us that know it and those of us that don't. And then I would add a category to that. How many people know how easy it is to contact it? A musician does. You know, if you talk to a jazz musician, a successful jazz musician, or, no, don't talk to him, listen. You'll see that that person relies on processes that are much higher than just conscious mind. They're not controlling anything. Everything is locked in, and they're depending on, for inspiration, a force that they know they will connect to every time. So if musicians can be that sure of it, in fact, without any ritual, without any costume, without any holidays, if a musician can connect with that without any belief system, it tells us that humans can connect with their own greatness and practice it. See, the difference is when you think about large subjects like, well, I'm going to do yoga, or I'm going to go to the Himalayas, or I'm going to study Qigong or Tai Chi, these are all pathways. But what if it's much easier than that to get in touch? What if it's as easy as watching yourself breathe? And when you watch yourself breathe, the absence of consequences is immediate. It's like a reset. And from that moment, performance is a success. And it doesn't matter what the performance is. You know, if there's one thing I've always loved about jazz, is that unlike a lot of other music, it is the most sophisticated music in terms of harmony and melody. Maybe not of rhythm. It probably is, but in jazz has evolved through mistakes. So who are the people that felt liberated enough to not only make mistakes, but to affirm that they are not mistakes because they were 100% behind what they said or what they played. And this explains most of the great people in history, doesn't it? So this book takes the lessons. I don't consider myself an expert on life, but I do consider myself an expert on the state of mind that produces perfect music. Now, when I talk about perfect music, do I mean never making a mistake? No, I definitely don't. Perfect music is you make a mistake and your own forgiveness is instantaneous, getting you back on your horse so fast you didn't notice you even fell off. This effortless mastery originally was about the term effortless mastery meant a complex action done from a mindless place automatically, effortlessly. So we all have examples of that, like using a fork. Use a fork thousands of times. Did you ever miss your mouth? Any physical action can be elevated and elevated and elevated until it becomes muscle memory. So then what does the mind do? Well, that's what most of the book is about. Where is your mind when you're playing? There are people that play and struggle with music that they actually know. Why would they struggle with music they know? Because they are expecting themselves to play it better than they're about to, or they have an image of how someone should play and they don't fit that image. So you see, in the mind, there's a bondage that will carry someone through life. There are people that live and die living in that realm of music. How did I play today? Oh, I think I did good. Well, I didn't make too many mistakes. But there's definitely no flourishing going on because you're not trusting the body. And then you want to teach the mind to receive, at minimum, receive the results, receive the sound. At maximum, love the sound. So there's more information in the book on the space. And again, every subject has been really expanded. There's a thing called the perfect instrument. Basically, what becoming the instrument means is it's nice to be a player, but it's so much nicer to be the instrument. Because as the instrument, you don't create, you are the vehicle for it creating. And notice both times I did not play a chord that we should necessarily like. But the metaphysical principle is if I like it, people will go, I don't know why I like it, but I like it. That's the power of creativity. Creativity is not dependent on success and failure. In fact, if failure is too active in your life, I would suggest the amount of creativity being used is minimal because it's being pursed. Is it the word pursed or parsed? It's being put out in very little bits to make sure you don't piss off anybody or you don't make a mistake. You know, this information is valuable for anybody in any subject of life. So there's a lot of interesting chapters here. There's a whole thing on comparing Eastern and Western approach to like a higher power. You know, I basically talk about the Eastern approach. The Western approach has always been we invented the wheel, and then we keep inventing things from there. And the Eastern approach is the wheel has always been there. What we want to do is attune ourselves to it deeper and deeper and deeper. Whereas I am a great fan of invention, I really think that my flow comes from attuning myself to what already is deeper and deeper and deeper. So, what lessons have I learned from music that I could pass on to people that are practicing life? Well, for example, what just happened? Perfect music. Why was it perfect? Because my mind stayed out of the way. Wherever my fingers wanted to go must be the right place because that's where they went. Music is, in the right state of mind, is to be fed, is to be enjoyed, even your mistakes, because your mistakes are things that are on the way to indicating what you need to work on to get to another level. But people that don't love themselves for the level they're on, ironically, have trouble moving on to another level. That's the same thing with everything else. If you're not willing to be at least self generous while you learn something new, you're probably not going to go very far. So that's a lesson I learned in music, and I've been practicing it in my life. I also know from music that I don't have to, in fact, I don't even consciously do it anymore, to touch the instrument. Can you feel the difference in me? To touch the instrument is to trigger divinity, perfect acceptance of oneself. So, what's the lesson there? In life, I've certainly had a much tougher time, but I have learned just in the last few years that if I'm criticizing myself, the only problem I'm having is that I'm criticizing myself. Is there anything wrong with seeing things you could do better? No. But self criticism becomes like an epidemic, doesn't it? It starts to affect areas that don't deserve or need criticism. And of course, from university training, we've learned that criticism and critique is it's totally antithetic to what true learning is. And I think there are some institutions that are trying to deal with that. I know that Berkeley is. I know that that's one of the reasons I'm there. Because if you're going to question everything you play, you're never going to play. But you learn to question everything you play quite intentionally. Now, in life, if you're going to question everything you do, you're not going to do much. So, one of the things I learned is that I should just keep working on loving myself, and when I fall short of it, I should remember that loving myself is the standard, not some. So, I'll just wait till I can get back to it emotionally instead of thinking there's something I need to change. Oddly enough, more has changed in my life since I accepted that nothing has to change. Very interesting. Where did I learn that? From music. If I played this, see, a mind that receives music, some people will say, well, that's okay, Kenny. You're a really great player. And so you can have the luxury of these kind of feelings. But you can go all the way to the moon and the stars just doing this. Do you realize this means that every human on the planet could get a piano and find what we call the one and then the five? And they could perfect their life in the receiving of that sound. So it leads to parts of the book where I suspect that becoming one with your own higher power is much easier than it's been represented. And it definitely doesn't need, you definitely don't need a concierge to meet God, if there is one. You can connect anytime you want. Music taught me that. A musician with a troubled mind, 30 seconds into this, would be saying, and I know the musicians on the call will be able to agree with this. They'd be going, okay, I'm playing the fifth man. It's very spiritual, man. What do I do now? Oh, and then what about all that shit that I need to show everybody? And you would hear a lack of conviction in this in less than a minute. Instead, I find myself sinking deeper and deeper into the perfection that I already am. And I've known this since I was 5, but I'd only say in the last few years was I finally able to integrate it more in my life. So this is truly lessons from music to life. It wasn't me originally that realized the lessons of effortless mastery, could be applied to life. It was the emails I got, and the people that came up to me and said, I have this company and I tried the 5-minute practice, all kinds of crazy stuff. There was this one soldier that wrote me that he could never get his suit on for, he was fighting in Iraq, and they had a process for getting the uniform, the coverage for the weapons of mass destruction should it happen, and you had to have it on in under 4 minutes, and he could never do it. And he read Effortless Mastery, and then he was doing it, and I thought, wow, great. I almost felt embarrassed because I was just writing about something I know. Music is easy. Music is a gift. And I like to splash this cold water into musicians' faces. First of all, it's only music. But here's the other one. I will never value my life, place a value on my life, over something as insignificant as how I play a musical instrument. Now, why is that helpful? Because most of you don't really believe that. It's helpful because if you really did believe it, you'd play better, which is actually why a musician even messes with philosophy. They just plain old hope it'll make them play better. Musicians are remarkably one-minded, Only when they are the greatest players do they let go of that. But most people are saying, oh yeah, I like this philosophy, but does it make me play better? The good news is if you embrace the truth is that every sound you make is the most beautiful sound you've ever heard, even from the left hand, for those piano players. So if I saw that in my life, that would be really, to say the least, a very inspired life. And it can be practiced. That's what the book talks about. Also, I just mentioned the idea of belief, right? There's a lot of, in the introduction, I say, this is an irreverent look at reverence. Because I believe you can access all the connection, power, expansion, freedom, intoxication, love, without knowing a damn thing about God, or not even know if there is one. What we don't empower enough, what we don't appreciate enough, is the power of a human being's faith. Faith, that wonderful, that terrible thing. Faith is a wonderful thing, it's a terrible thing. The wonderful thing is you can build your own bridge to your own higher power, and then you can receive from it. Your higher power may be Jesus, might be Charlie Parker, Rodney Dangerfield. How many of you know who that is? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's your ability to build the bridge on faith. That's the wonderful thing about faith. People tell you, I know this is true and that is true. They don't know that's true. They have no facts. It's faith. So if I say to you that God is playing through me, I still am not sure there even is a God, and I don't have to think so. In fact, in the middle of the book, I believe I create a new kind of hybrid theology. You can talk about God, but halfway through the book, I start using these initials. God, I-H-E, like BC or AD. So what does that mean? So the first time you see it, you go to the footnote at the bottom. It says, if he exists. Of course, it doesn't have to be he. The point is, you can build a bridge to the higher part of your own, to your higher power. It's funny, a program has had it right from the beginning. Belief in a higher power, your higher power. There's no doubt we have a higher power. Neuroscience affirms it now. There are certain places we can be where our taste, our concerns, our thoughts are quite mundane and pedestrian. And then there are places we can be where we are witnessing where we believe we're perceiving the miracle of this moment. So, how does the same brain do that? Programming. And I believe there is a lot of programming in the book. How do I program myself to expand my concept of myself? How do I program myself to be self loving, self accepting, and not need outside evidence to back it up? And when you approach a chore with that self acceptance, the chore inevitably comes out right anyway. And this is something that you don't have to take my word for. You go over your own experiences. And whenever you let go of your trepidation, you notice that you started to rise, you started to fly. And what do I mean by faith being a wonderful and a terrible thing? Well, because faith is building a bridge to a certainty that doesn't actually exist. So, of course, when that faith is directed towards things that are blatantly false, but it doesn't matter, that's terrible faith. So, faith is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing. But if I want to play music, I'd really rather believe that it's playing 50 years or more of believing that it's being played through me without the slightest concern because it doesn't involve me. Has really served me well. And that is a lesson from music that can be applied to life. So there's a lot of nice stuff in here. I talk about the movie, The King's Speech. There's a moment in the movie where King George VI, or fifth, I think it's the sixth, is about to be king because his brother is abdicating because of his, he wants to marry, you know that story, right? But he has a terrible stutter, and he's afraid if he's a king, he will be humiliated trying to give a speech. And he finds this unusual speech therapist who says, I'll prove to you right now, right here and right now, you can speak without stuttering. And he puts these headphones on him. He says, this is the greatest thing from America, a silver tone. And he puts on a Mozart, I forget what it is, a Mozart piece, and blasting it. Then he gives him the soliloquy, what is it, Shakespeare? To be or not to be, right? And we don't hear him speaking, but because he can't hear himself, he speaks perfectly. And as the movie goes on, it proves that it's more about a state of mind than just a physical condition. In fact, it's more about a state of mind than a physical condition. And so is music, and so is hitting a golf ball, and so is programming, and so is everything. Even if you take the career thing out of it, how do you look at other people? How do you feel around other people? Are you in the moment, or are you anticipating that they'll be judging you? The space is not being afraid of the future and not regretting the past. It's simply sinking into this moment. That's one of my favorite songs. It's from the end of the movie A Christmas Carol. Not those other ones, the one from 1950 with Alastair Sims. Do you know this song? Oh, man. Music. Oh, God. What a gift. Now, the harpsichord player in the movie did not play that chord, but nor that one. But you see, whatever hits my head comes out. Everybody is not going to feel comfortable in every environment doing that. But the book posits that you could practice it at home and start to create neurological connections to your own freedom, to your own self love, to your own self acceptance. And then, without thinking about it, noticing that you're operating in your world with more freedom, more love, more compassion, because compassion for others starts with compassion for yourself. More success, more everything. So that's what the book is about. I'm really proud of it. Um, I'm not. It was the first book was a data dump. I had worked so much, I had said so many things in real time. It was time to write a book. And now, 25 years later, I had that same feeling. It just was time to expand it to the whole world. And I'll just stop by also saying this, and then we could take questions. It has a lot of humor in it because I have a lot of humor in me. So I'm not going to write a book that doesn't have my voice. I'm not capable of it, and no one should ever have to express anything in any language but their voice. I think there was a quote that's actually pretty cool. Is it here? No, somebody said it the other day in a, well, it was pretty good. So I hope you read it. So, Viv, shall we, do we have any questions or?
I do have a couple of people with questions.
Great. So, yeah, it was a nice
Um,
controlled
yeah,
amount of time.
so let's start with the question that Darren has. He says, I teach music at a university. How do I divorce myself from the negative aspects of that situation to emphasize the more human aspects of music?
Well, first you have to learn it. If you find that you are caught in the same egoistic trap, then you need to practice it yourself because it's very hard to present it to someone else when you're just guessing. One of the things I like about myself is that everything I say is absolutely what I'm doing. So if you find that you play with self love, and if you play badly, you have instant forgiveness, and that on your worst night, you're still ready to go out and celebrate, well, then all you have to do is tell them what you're about in music. All you have to do is relay your example. But if you're faking it, which many people do, many people have a lot of beautiful phraseology, but they don't actually do it. For example, how normal it is for people these days to say, "Oh, love your mistakes." You know, everybody says it. How many people do it when they start playing? I think it's the first thing they forget. So it's really important to become that. And exercises from the two books, I think, really help you set up your own university. How do I become real? How do I become authentic? Because authentic is not the sound I want to make. Authentic is the sound I'm ready to make at this moment. If you truly are there, just relay your experience to them. That's always the best. The other thing institutionally is that schools are because of accreditation, they're set up with these end of the semester tests, which is unfortunate in a way because it interrupts the actual learning to play the instrument. In a way, when you have these recitals and finals, it's equivalent to in public school them teaching to the test. Instead of the kids learning things, they're just teaching them to the test because how they do in the test reflects on the records of the school. Well, accreditation sets up that whole culture of suspicion in a way. And you know what? That's not changing anytime soon. So you have to be a terminal for freedom in order for people to feed off of that, or in order to communicate that. That's the best way. That's number one. But there are things you can do. I mean, if you can do this and still prepare them for what the school demands, cut the amount of stuff you're teaching them down by about, 75%. Have them have the experience of mastering something, of owning something, because that will change everything else they do after that. But if all they're able to do is just barely grab onto it and then show some sort of representation of it, and teachers are willing to cooperate with that, okay, well, I guess it was good, give them whatever. We all have to cooperate in the dysfunction of university training. Teachers have to cooperate too. Because if you were really looking for mastery, almost everyone would fail. And the reason we cooperate is because it's not their fault, it's ours. Too much material covered creates a skimming effect. Music is one of those things, and you see, again, lessons from music to life. Music is one of those things you can't fake, like law or medicine. For example, if something comes up in the law, you've got a client, you go to that bookshelf that's inevitably behind the desk of every lawyer. And I wish I had $1 million for every lawyer that read all those books. I'd have nothing. But anyway, you go to one of those, he goes to a book and he looks it up. But music is, once you count it off, it's what you know and what you don't know. So skimming a subject provides, and I'm sure I forget the name you just gave me, Viv, but I'm sure you're aware of the effect of people skimming the subject. You might even be aware of it in your own playing. It's a bunch of things not quite actualized, not quite completed, not quite understood. For the classical musician, it's the notes. They have to absorb them to the point where the piece plays itself. Then that's a phenomenon. I believe when a classical player absorbs one piece at that level, they can tour the world playing one piece. But when you're managing a repertoire, that's a recital. Oh, he did very nice. He didn't make any mistakes. Oh, it was pretty good. That's so much less than music can be. I'd rather be able to play 4 bars that I own than 178 bars that I'm managing. What's real, what's authentic. So if you cut your curriculum down by so much that you and your students can focus on actually being able to play what you're teaching them. I'm going to give you a quick story, and this is about my daughter. And I think it really, you can take this and you can put it into an answer for the whole, Western civilization way of teaching, right? My daughter was studying piano, and a local teacher was teaching her, very good teacher, and she had read my book. I mean, I guess it was already out, and she agreed with everything, but she would move my daughter through pieces. See, people that teach kids, they have a little pressure. If your kid is on book 1, but your neighbor's kid is already in book 2 and they got a gold star in book 1, the teacher feels like they need to move through book 1 because the parents think that progress means they finished book 1. So I noticed my daughter playing one piece after another, but what my experience, this is where I go back to that, is that that's not playing. And I don't care that she was, what was she, 7, 8 years old? I don't care. Playing is easy. If it's difficult, you haven't learned what it is yet. So I took over, which I will always tell you is a mistake in most cases. You do not try to teach your daughter anything because your daughter, if you're a father, can wrap you around her pinky. But I started to teach her, and she was playing this little Vivaldi piece. But it was like, the struggle that most kids have. And I say, stay with it, stay with it. She'd avoid some lessons. We would do lessons. She didn't practice, which I remember that was the way I was. So I wasn't terribly upset. But she would also listen in when I was teaching other people. Finally, I don't know how many months this was. I want to say 10, but it could be 7. One day she goes, "Dad, is this what you meant?" And he goes, she played this piece. It was a 1-page Vivaldi piece. And she was looking at me. And she was playing it perfectly because she knew it well enough. See, a kid shouldn't know about the feeling of a music 15 years after they start studying. They should know the piece well enough on the first piece so I could say, what if you played that piece and you were angry? What if you played that piece and you were playing with your friends? What would you see? You have to know the notes to do that. When she finally knew the notes, she was like, "Is this what you meant, Dad?" I said, "Yeah," but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I said, "That's it. Let's go have dinner." Now, yeah, what parents would be okay with the teacher teaching one piece for 10 months? Nobody, it would be a tremendous pressure. But after she learned that one piece, for the rest of her life, she knew what it was to play music. When she played anything else, she knew that was it. If it was struggle, she knew she didn't know it yet. That's a great knowledge to find. And then she went on to violin. She played it like this. And then she went on the guitar, which was really her instrument, and she played it like that. And if she was having trouble, she would say, "I can't get this thing here." Not that she wasn't playing it, but it wasn't easy. So she knew she wasn't done with it. So, long answer, but your question is a great question. And teachers, I believe we've gotten to the point of evolution where many, many teachers are having this exact question. I know this isn't right, but what do I do? So, first, it would be helpful if that was your path that you were working on. And secondly, you have to make some drastic decisions. You have to be okay in yourself as you say, you know, you're playing it right, but you don't know it yet. And I want you to know this. So go home and work on it again. Cutting that down would be a big a commitment to owning something, not just scuffling through it. I'll try to make the next answer shorter.
The next question is from Mark Eisenman. He is wondering if you're familiar with Zen and the Art of Archery.
Yeah, I quote it a lot in Effortless Mastery. It was one of the books I read in my development, and it is totally, where this guy's just telling his story of studying with a Zen master. But my favorite story in there is that at one point, the master wanted him to learn how to loose the bow, which is the term, I guess, for how you hold it. And I think in the book he says it took 2 years. And one day he did something else that kind of got him to it, but it was kind of a cheating thing. He didn't become, these days it's a cliche, become the ball, become the this. You know, as soon as we get a grain of truth, humans mangle it up. So now, if you said to somebody, become this, you'd think of the when Bill Murray said it, in Groundhog Day, But the truth is, you have to pass all those barriers between you and the subject until you are one, you know? So he shows the teacher one time, he goes, I think I got it. And the teacher saw what he did. And he just said, follow me. And he goes into the barn and he blindfolds himself and he shoots a arrow into a bullseye and he shoots another arrow into the back of that bullseye. And I guess the equivalent, I read the book 40 years ago. I don't know. The equivalent of any questions? So the guy continued to trust him. And some point he got to the form that the master recognized and they moved on from there. So yeah, it depends on whether you just want to kind of stumble through things or would you like to experience mastery. That was more the subject of the first book. By the way, I like to say that my definition of mastery has changed. Um, Mastery is not that you play perfectly. Mastery is that if you don't play perfectly, you forgive yourself instantly. Mastery, there's a one chapter that has one sentence on every page. This was not my idea, but one of the editors said this would be great because it was, I think, 16 variations on a theme. And it's just stuff I've said, And one of the things I have said is with effortless mastery, you can never you might make a mistake with effortless mastery, but you could never go wrong. It just depends on if you want to make the God of your universe, whether you make mistakes or not. And I would suggest that's a very tight space to live in. Next.
Chris, if you want, you can unmute.
Oh, hi, Kenny.
Hi.
Um, yeah, I was just wondering about, and I'm, I'm a disciple of effortless mastery and stuff like that, and I was just wondering, talking um, about when you're playing and having you becoming the instrument. I mean, the way that I was taught and the way that I teach kids about improvising is that that you hear it first. You hear the melody that you're going to play
Ooh,
or whatever, and
okay.
then you do it. I mean that sort of phrase about. So I guess
Yeah,
it's
yeah. But can I
probably
interrupt you right there? Is it
yeah,
Chris?
absolutely, yeah.
Chris, this is one of the great misnomers of jazz education. You have to hear what you're going to play. Okay. And I'm not talking about, I'm going to get back to your situation because you're talking about kids. There's one problem with that statement. It's impossible. You can never hear what you're going to play because you're hearing what you're presently playing. And yet teachers pass this on like, dutifully. It sounds reasonable enough. It's just impossible to do. It's actually quite the other way around. If you want the kids to develop a bond that doesn't get interrupted by doubt, then what you have them do is play first. Emphasize the physical act. and then have them practice thinking it was just the right thing. Have them embrace the sound as soon as they hear it, and that will create the bond. But it is such a opposite, such a falsehood that you could. What an inhibitor! I've got to hear it, and then I've got to find it. That guarantees a separation for life. So I'm going to suggest, since you had the courage to propose it, that you turn it around. Have them play. There's things you don't realize about music when you're trying to understand it simultaneously. And one of the things you don't realize is how easy it is. I want to really, when we really get this going, I want to bring in non players, introduce them to the space, and have them play one note at a time. And from the space, they're going to realize they're actually doing something. you know so I have to respectfully, because I don't want to mess with a disciple of the book, but I would say exactly the opposite. Wherever the hands go, there they are. Now I believe that was "I Can't Stop Loving You," Ray Charles. But why? Who knows? Who cares? Did you have another part to that, Chris? Was
No,
that it?
no, sir. That was a beautiful answer, and I've been struggling with that a little bit too, and I think I can articulate that. And I do forgive you for being a Yankees fan. I'm from Baltimore.
Well, Baltimore is not too bad. I have a little pity there. I thought you were going to say you were from Boston, in which case I'm
Great.
here to
Let's
say that.
let's go to the next question.
Yes, yes,
I
please.
want to keep it to the new book, but
Hey,
let's
listen, I'm
let's
very
go
disappointed
Pierre.
with the. I'm very. Excuse me. I'm very disappointed with the Yankees. They feel more like a museum piece than a team that wants to win. Anyway, go ahead.
Pierre, you're up.
Oh, sorry. I would offer myself, in case anyone's got this power, to be an effortless mastery coach for the hitters and pitchers of the New York Yankees. Okay, Vivian, go ahead.
Hi, Kenny. And first of all, congratulations on the new book. I'm looking forward to getting it and reading it.
Thank you.
I've been a music lover and like all my life, like everyone pretty well here on the call. And I'm pursuing the art of the craft of songwriting. So I'm looking at lyrics and music, but it's a kind of a passion hobby type thing. I'm just wondering, how do your principles apply to I guess the act of getting the lyrics come through you? Because I'm in the midst of reading a book about Tom Petty, and to me he was one of the greats. And he was able to write songs in a matter of 20 minutes, and we're talking hits that have lasted and will endure. So how can your principles kind of apply to a guy like me to say, open up and get these lyrics going? Because I've got lots of ideas, but it's a craft, and we have to rewrite and work on it. So how
Gotcha.
could
I
yeah,
got it.
thanks.
Your first mistake is comparing yourself to anyone else, because you'll never be respectful of what you can do because you're expecting what Tom Petty can do. And then this is all ego. You're transposing failure. You're putting out failure because you already know of a successful model and you're not doing it. So I think we all know there's a saying in program: compare and despair. So the first thing you want to do is take your comparisons to any other songwriters and see if you can, and when you start to compare, see if you can watch yourself breathing instead. It's like a statement like, okay, I've done this many times. I've compared myself to whoever. I always say this: that never ends well. I think I'll watch myself breathe. It's a very profound statement that you don't want to go down the road of delusion that's so easy for the modern mind to do, right? So that's for starters. Second of all, write some bad lyrics and then attach some bad music to it, and then go out and celebrate. When people ask me about composers, or last night there was an author, And it's always the same answer. I answer a question with a question. That's what Jews do. A question, answer with a question with a question. What is the most anxious moment as a songwriter? The blank page, right? Now you ask yourself, why is that an anxious moment? Why would a blank page be an anxious moment? Because you want to write something good. So I always say to them, go home and ye verily, isn't that something in the Bible? Verily ye, go write some shit and then go celebrate. Because if you go home and write something bad, you'll fill page after page. Now, the question is neurologically, what effect will that have on you? How quickly will you be accosted by true inspiration because you're not anymore intimidated by no inspiration? You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, as an exercise in freedom, go home and write the worst thing. I mean, or allow it to be as bad as it is, or worse, something derivative. You know, some people, you know, think that God grant me cleverness. Let my songs be clever. Let my books be clever. Let my speeches be clever. God forbid I'm not clever. So do your uncleverest shit, right? And forget about it. Because the question is, see, all the exercises that are in becoming the instrument and the exercises that were in Effortless Mastery, it took me years to understand this myself. You don't try to apply this to your life. That's a formula for sabotage. If you go play with some people and you say, you know, I practice with Kenny Werner, not, you know, letting go of my performance, I'm going to walk into this bunch of guys and I'm going to let go of needing to sound good, and you play 3 notes and now you do care. Now you don't just beat yourself up for your playing, you beat yourself up for not being able to let go. You know, I described that in the first book. We're used to beating ourselves up with a real hammer. So then there's this new age hammer. Was I letting go? Now you're beating yourself up. That's a mauve. Is it mauve? What's that color? Not pink exactly, but mauve, you know, like the clouds. It's a hammer that's that color. And you go, boing, boing. You have a new thing to fail at. You're failing to succeed. You're failing to let go. You know, I think the freedom is really look the beast in the eye. A lack of cleverness. Oh my God. And celebrate yourself. You know? And what I think will happen, well, it's happened to me. I could write a song right now because I don't care if it's a good song. So I can guarantee you I can write a song right now. But some of it would start getting really good. This is another trick of the mind. Whenever I've shown a composer, I say, just start writing notes. All right, so they're detached enough, but it only takes about 5 of them before they realize they're writing something good. Maybe good is the absence of your care and control. Maybe instant inspiration is when you actually drop your own sense of caring and control, you know? So for whatever reason, they get like, you know, like I did this 10 times already today. Every jazz or even classical musician knows that I can make a piece out of that now. I could make a symphony out of it. There's never a bad order of notes. When you keep blessing whatever order of words or notes you play, you start losing the ability to do bad ones. But you have to create that new neurological pathway. See, it really all comes down to neurology. And I knew it. I mean, I am proud of my lack of erudition on all subjects. But this is all just a feeling, you know? If you want freedom, you have to wade into that water that your ego doesn't want to, where you're not that special. And all you have to do is bless that as special. Not one day. You might have to bless that as special for 2.5 years. But if it liberated the rest of your life, would it not be worth it? Does that kind of help you?
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, it's that idea of free and not judging yourself and being so self-critical and just letting it flow.
But there's not one person here now that doesn't agree with that. but there may be 98% of the people can't actually do it. So you have to understand what this book is talking about, and Effortless Mastery really too, but I understand it so much better now. You have a philosophy. You just stated something. You could go out and do lectures now. What you just said is what everybody wants to hear. The problem is you're not actually doing it yourself. So there's a philosophy, right? A philosophy is usually a great idea that one has not grown into. They recognize it, but they're not that. To make that active, you have to find a practice. And that practice moves you incrementally towards the implementation of what you just said. Now, this has been recorded, so if you watch it again, I want you to hear what you said, because I couldn't have said it better. But if you want to do that, you need a practice. And that practice needs to be incremental. I always favor that it be small. As a person that could never really work too long myself, I've learned how to get a lot out of a little bit of time, But I tell you, 5 minutes a day, a blessing, any splotch that you put on a piece of paper will change your life, because it changes neurology. Suddenly you realize even when you care, you're so used to this, you kind of don't care too. Right on. You take it out and you try to apply it, that's just, you're asking for, like Carrie at the end of the movie, boom, pig's blood all over you and blah, blah, blah. Forget it. You're asking to be sabotaged, completely sabotaged. Right. What you do is you practice it at home, and then you walk out and you forget it. And then you notice, wow, I'm suddenly free. And then you notice you're not free anymore, because you just noticed that you were free. But you see, this is the dance. But you say, that doesn't matter, so I'm not free now. That, when you learn that, now it starts to become consistent. It's happening when it's not happening. That's, there's been a lot of writing about that. There was a book called The Dark Side, blessing that part of yourself that you're ashamed of, or that part of yourself you don't respect. And I've worked on that all my life. Life does not come as easily to me as music, but the lessons are from music to life.
Wow. Thank you, and very good luck and much success on your new book. Thank you very much for the answer.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm hoping we hit the New York Times bestseller list. And from there, I want to do a talk play, what I call talk play, which is almost what this is, but I want to do it at Carnegie Hall. So my friends there, get working on it.
That gets me to the question from Joe. Does this new book include some of your stand-up routine you've been working on?
Yes. Wow. Thank you for that question. Some of you that know me a little better know that music is my temporary job, but I am working towards making a full conversion to comedian. And some of those routines are there. Oh, some of them are really good. I have this whole thing that I never really did for anybody, but it's in the book. And if there's any movie people, check this out. You know all the commercials that are on TV about different medicines, right? You're watching it and there's like, Verata and Castrata and Elbitra and Gatata and, and Frittata and Kishka, you're right? It's all, first they tell you what it does, and then the rest of the commercial, the guy's playing with his grandchild and rocking him with a tire that's hanging from a tree, right? And he's saying, watch out, it could create blindness and a gambling addiction, and you might have a liver failure, and they do the rest of the commercial. So here's my commercial. You see a garage door in a suburbia place. Guy pulls up the garage door. He's about, my age, a little older, right? He looks out and he's smiling. It's a sunny day. And he goes, the mind. The voice goes, the mind. What a wonderful thing. It can see the joy of birds. It can appreciate the trees. It can appreciate the clouds. And the guy's smiling and like that. And he goes, possible side effects, envy. And you see the guy go, anxiety, depression, comparing yourself to others, greed, and as they're saying all the side effects, the guy's going like this and like that. But then they shoot to another shot. he's pushing his granddaughter on a tire, and he keeps saying, what, possible side effects of gambling addiction, suicide, blah, blah, blah. You're right, the mind, And then they say, if you have any of those symptoms, please consult your pastor or therapist immediately. So that's a chapter in the book, actually. Then there's another chapter about how Western music started. You know how Western music started? Well, of course, in this, okay. It started with the unison, of course. Gregorian chant. And then one day, a kid comes in and says to the choral director, "Can I sing with you?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know. Can you sing?" He goes, "Oh, sure." He said, "All right, we'll go over there and do it." And everything he sings is, oh, oh. Everything is an octave higher. So the choir director goes, "Get him out of here." But one of the, what do you call them when they're sitting on the board? The, when you sit on a board, you're a board member. Okay, fine. That says, "Excuse me, can I talk to you? Hey, director, can I talk to you? Listen, this kid is the son of one of our biggest contributors, and I know he'd really appreciate if you could get him into the choir." So he says, "Okay, go back there." So for 50 years, they have to endure the octave. But then they get used to it, and then it's the modern music, right? Then a farmer comes in one day and he goes, "Can I sing with y'all?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know. Can you sing?" He said, "Sure." And he comes in and everybody else is singing this. And he's going, "Oh." And the choir director goes, "Get this guy out of here. He's horrible." Well, again, one of the board directors comes up and says, "This farmer is very rich, and we just got him to give up all his worldly possessions and donate them to the church, and he's going to be a priest. So please, can't you find a way to put him in there?" So they endure the fifth for about another 75 years. And then someone comes in and sings out of tune with the fifth, and it's the fourth, and then it's the third, right? And then music moved into the chromatics, the Romantic period. And we think we invented all this stuff. But actually, our discovery of intervals moves roughly along the lines of the harmonic system. Octave, unison, octave, fifth, fourth. So we thought we invented the wheel, but we were just uncovering it. So of course that's a joke, but I think it's kind of a funny part of the book. There's definitely some jokes in there. Next question.
Great. The next question is from Soren.
They're not really a question. Yeah.
My man, Soren?
Yeah, your man,
Yeah.
Soren. Hi
Oh,
there.
that's my man.
Love from Copenhagen to you all. I just wanted to go down a different path because I've had the book today and I've read it. Background, I studied with Kenny quite many years ago, and he liberated my sense of being an artist, and that applied for music for a long time. But just to share with you all and with Kenny an example of how working from the space and meditation and sound can change something that is totally outside music. We've been talking about music now. One of the many things that I've done is to help teachers, and particularly teachers with school children that have difficulties, either learning or coping or adjusting or psychologically. And oftentimes I will go into schools and help change them with music, dance, and the arts, and with filmmaking and storytelling. And one thing I discovered is that one of the many things that Kenny has taught applies to something that we at least superficially think is different from music. So one of the things that Kenny taught us is sit down, touch the music, and let it happen, and listen to whatever comes out of these maybe random notes from a piano, say, and tell yourself, this is the most beautiful sound that I've ever heard. That was an opening portal for me to be an archaeologist, looking into my own tastes and expanding them to find out what I liked and what I didn't like. It was also an opening to practicing, systematically what it takes to make sounds that pleases me. But when I started out with all these normal teachers, I would often notice that they were stressed at having a lot of children being very unattentive, disengaged, distressed, and oftentimes very noisy. And they would be under a lot of pressure. Whereas musicians were under pressure to perform and make a living, the teachers are often under pressure to manage 20, 30 kids, and they think that if they are not good teachers, they are not good people. So when they had these noisy classes, I would stop them in their tracks and say, listen, instead of trying to regulate all these people, try just to listen. Listen to the sound of this unruly, noisy environment and tell yourself for some time, this
That is
is
the
the
most
most
beautiful
beautiful
sound
sound
I've ever
I've
heard.
ever heard. And that would be, I mean, that is just a small opener, but it's a nice hook to getting people into working minutely in detail, systematically, with accepting things in order to change them for something better for everybody. And the most important thing that I discovered from doing this that was that they could almost never do it alone. So I would pair teachers in, two teachers would help each other to follow this path of opening themselves to whatever was there and working with mental judo to change it. But they could rarely do it on their own. So my suggestion to aspiring musicians or seasoned musicians is find a kind soul to help you stay on that track of being open to whatever is there and support each other. Over to you,
Mm.
Kenny.
That's a wonderful idea. I don't think I've actually just started to toy with that idea myself, especially when we were doing Thank You, Soren. I need to take a moment to pick up on several of his themes. But on the last one, when I had to teach for almost 2 years on Zoom, I started to suggest, why don't you connect each other on Zoom and practice being in the space together? And it started to cause some really interesting connections with people. And now I use it even when we're there. I say, are you waiting for me to conduct you into this special space? Or will you do it with each other and support each other? And when someone missed something, Soren, I'd say, great, Eddie or whoever the kid is, I want you to teach that to them, because then actually you'll know it better because you were tasked with teaching it to someone else. So 100% on that point. The other point is, Soren is actually accentuating. See, when I'd hear this from people, I thought, well, I was just trying to help musicians get out of their way. And then I'd hear all these applications. That's what led to this. This is intentionally what that big book did accidentally. So, yeah. Um, and the other thing is practicing this idea. That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Now, there's a few people on here that I've taught. And you might have thought when we first worked on that, that was a great beginning. But of course, you've moved on now and you're much more into the third step or the fourth step. There are 4 steps in effortless mastery, right? But the fact is, the first lesson of whoever I've ever taught should never stop repeating that lesson, because that lesson is not just a way to get started, it's the start and the finish. If you were to do that first lesson and decide to never stop doing it, which means being in the space, because the mind will tell you you've done it enough. So from the space, you just say, that's what I do. I compare that kind of practice to brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth with a destination in mind. You don't go, wow, I'm really getting somewhere now. Boy, soon I'm going to have these virtuosic white teeth. No, no matter how well you brush them tonight, you fully expect to brush them tomorrow morning. So a few people that I saw here that I know studied with me, what if you did in the morning on your cello or whatever? That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. And go blank. That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. And then at night, before you went to sleep, you did it, no matter how well you did it in the morning. If you could take some of the basic exercises and submit it to the superior level of either a hobby, see, because hobbies we don't stop because we're not trying to get anywhere, or like brushing your teeth. You can change your life incrementally and it will never stop changing between today and death day. The idea of evolving will just never stop, but it will take the smallest exercise, never stop repeating, not big dramatic things. Big dramatic things tend to be sequences. Oh, I was into yoga for a while, or I went to this ashram for a while and then I found it, but then I lost it. It has to be something small enough and portable enough to be useful anywhere, anytime. And actually, I'll just take a moment because what Soren hasn't seen. The funny thing is, Soren was there when I first started teaching. I was called to teach at the New School. Arnie Lawrence had started the jazz division of the New School, and he wanted me to sub for Larry Willis, a great piano player. And I don't think Soren was at that. But my very first time, I come in, and it's this full auditorium, and they're doing a midterm. And I thought, first he said, you want to teach? I said, no, I don't care about teaching. Pays $150. I said, what time? So I get there, and it's a midterm. All I have to do is sit there like a homeroom teacher. And when they get done, they bring up their papers. Most of them didn't know me. So they brought up their papers, and they're leaving. This is how it started, Soren. They're leaving, and Arnie says, no, everybody sit down. Sit down. Kenny, show them some of your shit. Show them some of your shit. So I said, look, if I had just taken the midterm, I'd want to get out of here. So I don't really want to tax them. He said, no, show them your shit. I said, well, I'm not sure what my shit is, but so I look at the test, and the test says, what is the first chord of body and soul? So I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I go, okay, somebody, what's the first chord of body and soul? Yells out E flat minor. I said, wrong. It is the first chord. Someone else yells out A flat sus. That's kind of a substitute. Wrong. So people yelled out whatever they could think about. Now, this was in the 80s. So these young musicians in the 80s, it was very much the time of what they call the jazz police. That started in the 80s. The 70s was wildly free and not nearly disciplined enough. The 80s reasserted discipline, but it kind of looked down on freedom. So these kids are going, oh man, you're full of shit. What is this shit? And I still don't know exactly where I was going, but I was enjoying that they were yelling at me. So then I said, well, you want the answer? I said, any chord could be the first chord of body and soul. And they all went, oh, he's one of those 70s guys. Oh, yeah. I said, well, let's try it. They said, B major. I went. They said, C major. I have to be sharp 9. No matter what they said, I made it the first chord and accidentally gave them the best harmony lesson of their life. After that, Arnie had me sub for everybody. And I don't know when Soren came in, but it was great because in those days they had just started. You taught for the week and you went up to the office and got a check. I taught so much that at the New School that I got a check for $1,200, which was amazing because I was just getting sober and I was not really working. So suddenly I was teaching everybody there and many of the courses because the jazz faculty was really authentic, great jazz musicians. And as part of that tradition, at least somebody didn't show up every day. So I was teaching every day. The next year they hired some administration and they hired me. And Zoran was there while I was working all this stuff out, but I wasn't working anything out. I was receiving and I was transmitting. And all that stuff was the beginning of what eventually led to Effortless Mastery. And all the stuff that I've done since then is what has led to becoming the instrument. One comment on becoming the instrument. When you become the instrument that plays the instrument, there is no greater feeling on any level. If you have physical problems, they go away. It is the actual experience of you're uniting with your own higher power, whatever you choose to call that. It is an instant buzz, which is what everybody's looking for, but suddenly we're looking for the buzz in the right place. We're getting a buzz from what is. And as someone asked me about last night, I said, humans turn the extraordinary into the ordinary. Now we're turning it back into the extraordinary by just centering ourselves on it. And that lesson could be, then people like Soren would try it in other realms. And that's how I realized that it was a universal message, and it was time to write another book. How are we doing, Viv?
I do have a few more questions.
I'm okay if people want to hang, you know. You okay, Josh? Okay. I'm at my good friend's studio. I'm going to tell you all, I live in a place where you can't even get a pastrami sandwich. But 10 minutes away from me is one of the nicest studios. Beautiful studio, great engineer, Joshua Druckman, beautiful piano. I helped him pick it out. And I think reasonable prices. In fact, as Crazy Eddie used to say, his prices are insane. But some of you don't remember that commercial. I've learned most of what I've learned through commercials. After that, it's TV shows and movies. After that is the Mahabharata and
Are there movies in your book?
there are movies in my book. I talk about one episode of Twilight Zone. I talk about the King's Speech. I can't remember where else, but it comes up because the modern scripture today is the medium of movies and television shows. That is modern scripture. There's a lot of stuff you can get from that. And I do get stuff from that. But I get that, or it could be the Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't matter, you know. When you take this stuff in, you stop thinking you're doing something spiritual and you just yield to the reality that it's common sense. Is it common, for example, something I learned in music and I talk about in the book? Now, let's say you are in school and you're getting to the point where you have all these projects, a final project, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I see a lot of people who are mentally disturbed from all the overwhelming work they have to do, right? So when they go to work or practice, they think of all the stuff they have to do, and many of them find they can't get up off the couch. Does anybody vibrate with that? And because they're thinking about all the things they have to do, this is the conscious mind, this is the ego. In fact, this is the swamp that I lovingly call the shithole. Okay? When you are putting something in a context, you're almost paralyzed. So if I think of all the things I have to do, and this was a gift to me, I cannot do anything unless I narrow it down to one thing. So I tell my students, whether or not you're neurotically thinking about all the stuff you have to do, or you're just doing one thing from the space, how many things can you work on at a time? So everybody they think it's a more difficult question than it is. It's obvious. One thing. You can be thinking about 11 things you have to do, but all it's going to do is rob you of the presence that's needed for the one thing you're working on. But even if you are thinking about everything else, you can only work on one thing. Therefore, from the space, you want to eliminate the presence of anything but that one thing. So I would talk about, and I was a dysfunctional student. I'd bring these books home. I couldn't open a single book. I had OCD, ADHD, and very, very bad Tourette's. I mean, worse than any kids I've ever seen. I was often sent home from school for Tourette's because of noise, not the one they do on TV where you're cursing. Noises, grunts, motions that I couldn't control. And sometimes I'd be in tears and they would send me home. And when I brought my books home, I would just grunt and groan. I couldn't open a single book. And I had to learn to be able to focus on the space, so much so. In fact, I want to share one more thing with my daughter, something that I'm really proud of as a father. She had Tourette's. And she came home the first year. I thought it was third grade. Second grade, Lorraine thought it was fourth grade. I forget we weren't sure, but it doesn't really matter for the story. She came home for the first time, instead of all books that you draw in and little books that you read, she came home with a pile of big books. And she's sitting at the kitchen table and she's twitching and, and crying and, not really crying, but you just tear. She didn't know what to do. And thank you, whoever is there, that I happened to be home because I did tour a lot. And I said, that's the moment I stopped learning in school. And I said, Catherine, relax. It's okay. Now, just take one of those books. Now, open it. Go to the first page. We're just going to look at this page. And if you want, we'll stop after that. So her Tourette's quieted down. And then we started to look at the page, and it wasn't overwhelming to think about one page. We got to the end of the page, and I said, okay, we're done. She goes, no, turn the page. And it was right there that I grabbed her from what nobody grabbed me at that moment and showed her that one page at a time, it doesn't matter if you bring home 50 books. That lesson went into how I solved my own problem practicing. Then it went into how I helped others. Then it went into effortless mastery. And then it went into becoming the instrument. Lessons, you take what you can't do, and if you figure it out, it can be a lesson that others can benefit from.
Can you tell a bit more about the meditations that are in the book? Since
Oh,
you were
that's what I thought
talking
Soren was going
about
to say.
the
There
studio.
are, for those of you that have enjoyed, first of all, I want to say that I did do an audiobook of Effortless Mastery. People have been wanting it for a long time. So if you're not aware of that, I did it right here in this studio. And I redid the meditations with new piano music. And it's really nice. But then I did 4 more meditations. These are brand new, that you don't get a disc in the book anymore. I think there's a website, there's a link in the book,
Yes,
and you click
it's
on
in the
that,
book.
and then you get the meditations with me playing piano behind it. And I love them. I was using them in my classes. I love them. So if you like the first ones, the second ones I think are at least as good, maybe even better. And yeah, that's a nice thing, because it's one thing to talk about the space, but you have to have a moment where the space is actually something you're experiencing. The idea of the meditations in both books were that you would have a moment where, oh, this is what he's talking about. And if you say, this is what he's talking about, what I'd like to hear you say next is, wow, it really is easy. Because if something is difficult, you put that in your mind and it becomes difficult. So I'm going to say playing music and having music available as my servant is easy. Studying is easy. French, not so easy. But many other things, very easy.
Yeah, you've been studying French for a while.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Okay, Peter Erskine is here, and I wanted to say thanks for
Peter!
coming. It's such a pleasure.
Wait a minute,
He,
first for Peter. Hello, my love.
He
Where's my
made a
boy?
comment
Peter.
earlier. Peter said in the chat, the best of pieces of advice he got from you was deal with it.
Say that again?
The best piece of advice Peter got from you was apparently deal with it.
Wow, really? But you see, Peter has always been a model
Love
in
to
my
know in
life
which
of someone
what the
that
context
deals
was.
with it. Are you sure you didn't give me that advice, Peter? That sounds more like right. Anyway, I love you. I love you, man.
Let's see. So yeah, Coleman is saying, how's this book different from Effortless Mastery?
It is now related to a much wider range of subject, spiritually, psychologically, neurologically, physically. There are certain physical things that you want to be able to create muscle memory so that you don't have to think about music. There's only two reasons you can't let go when there's music. One is because you think what you're doing is important, which tends to freeze you up. But the other one's very understandable. You have not taught yourself the muscle memory of playing yet. And managing music is kind of a mediocre level, but when it plays itself, there's nothing like it. And to me, that's the only thing there is. So those lessons, it's just a much wider subject. I think I would expect this book, well, I've already heard from a few people that read it from advance, and I gave it to a therapist, and she said, wow, I changed the therapy I was doing. I gave it to a Swami of an extremely spiritual order, and he said he was having spendas, like I gave it to, I'm kind of pleased that it has the power, because I don't want to move into any realms that I don't understand. I don't understand them because I'm a master of life. I understand them because I've learned them in music and had the gift of passing them along as a teacher. I cannot overstate the importance in my development from having to teach everything. I would say I would not be anywhere near where I am if I didn't fall into teaching it to somebody else. But this really does relate it to the whole world. And I think what I mean, I know musicians will be helped by it, but I actually believe that now it really invites anybody in any area. Do you want to be living your life, riding your bicycle into the wind, working very hard and making very little progress? Or do you want to switch to neurology so that you're riding the bicycle with the wind at your back? You're actually pedaling less and you're moving much faster. I believe the book is much more of a total statement in that direction. And if you're smiling while you're reading it, you're already in the space. So it's different in its scope, I guess, if I could say it in one. So I've been always saying Effortless Mastery has been weaving concentric circles of relevancy. And after teaching it as semesters, it got to this, and I thought it's time for another data dump. And that's what this book is.
We have a question from Craig. He says, learning a melody, when would you say I own the melody?
When it plays itself. Well, here, can you do this? Do you know how much self-control it took for me not to start to mess with that? But, it plays itself. So if I can do it with that, why can't I do it with another? If people were taught from the beginning, instead of learning 5 pieces and teaching a 7-year-old how to hunch I talk about this in the book. Why teach a 7-year-old how to hunch their shoulders like an accountant? Why not have them master the first piece and learn from the beginning? Music is easy. Music is natural. And if it's difficult, it's that you haven't finished learning it. There's a big difference between difficult and unfamiliar. That was covered in the first book. When something's unfamiliar, you presume it's difficult, but it's only difficult while it's unfamiliar. So teach the familiarity. Okay? So if you're going to play a melody like that's around midnight, right? The fact that I don't have to think about it is how you know you own it. But that could be a strange concept to people because they've spent their entire lives learning something 50 to 75%, meaning if they concentrate, they play it right. The problem is, what's waiting to sabotage them is when the circumstances change. You're playing it with somebody or there's someone listening. So you want to eliminate that by it plays itself. I could be nervous right now. I want to tell you one other little story, and that's in the new book. There are times when I would teach people and they would play for me and they always say, I play a lot better than that. Peter, I'm sure you've heard that, right? Or do you ever have anybody come in and want to show you how they play by bringing a tape in of them playing? And I say, why did you bring the tape? I say, well, I want you to hear how I play. I say, well, you could just sit down and play. Oh no, but they want you to hear how good you were playing when it was good. but that's not really you. Because if it was you, it would be you right now. So they'll play for me, and it's kind of I'm sure they do play better, but they say I didn't play so well because I was nervous playing for you, and I say nope, that's not right. If you were nervous and that's why some parts of this went wrong, then why did you play anything right? Right? Why did you play some things right if you were nervous? The answer is not that you played them wrong because the other thing's wrong because you were nervous. That the answer is that the things that went right, no matter how nervous you are the things you really know. And the things that you thought you knew and that you wanted to convince yourself you knew so you could move on, this diseased way of practicing and this diseased way of looking at oneself as not complete and not enough, right? So those things, yeah, every time you play it, you went, and then you went, and you never really dealt with it so that bars 5 and 6 were as secure as bars 3 and 4. That's going to come up when you're nervous. So in the 4th step of effortless mastery, we start dealing with actual mastery of the material. So there I like to talk about this, and I talked about it in this book too. There's white and there's black. And in between, a lot of gray area. Most people's playing falls somewhere in the gray area. The closer they are to white, it's music, so I prefer it. White represents complete lack of music, and black is total mastery. That's my scale. The gray area that's whiter and whiter is closer and closer to sabotageable material because you don't really know it. The closer it gets to black, the less you have to manage it. So there's a lot of benefits to that. That means even if you got a cold or you're nervous or you're playing with somebody you want to impress, but you don't mess up because the body plays it. And when the body plays it, you don't have to. Now, this opens up a whole other world that I explore much more completely in this book. Okay, so if I say, I have built a faith that when I'm playing, it's not me. So I'm looking at, when I'm playing with Peter, it's like, he kind of looks like Buddha. So I'm playing with Peter and I'm just enjoying that smile on his face. I'm not really noticing what I'm playing. That's how you know it's authentic. That's how you know it's organic. I can tell even great players, the moment they want to make something happen, I hear it. And it's just a little thing I don't have to care about, but I do hear it. But when you're not even paying attention to yourself, everything is organic. Everything is authentic because it is what it is. So you can't do that unless the material, the technology of what you're doing is closer to the black than the white. Rhythm, for example, there are many players that have never been able to let go. So if you go and you give it, those of you that are teachers, you give a speech about letting go and being creative, but you don't have to think about rhythm, and they do. Why is it working for you and it doesn't work for them? Because the lesson they should be hearing is until you can play 4/4 time or whichever time without thinking, you can't take the lesson I'm about to give you about letting go. So very often the philosophical is way out of order. You're challenging people to be like you when they haven't mastered the basics that you mastered. So the funny thing is, as philosophical, spiritual, hopefully comedic as I seem to be, when I'm teaching, I revel in getting someone to get the foundation that they missed. Because if they don't, they're never going to enjoy anything they see other people enjoying. And I don't care if it takes until they graduate. That's why I'm not really lined up too well with an accredited institution. If you don't have rhythm by your 3rd semester, you have to work on rhythm in your 4th semester. And if you don't have rhythm in your 4th semester, when you graduate, you may be just in the middle of learning rhythm. Actually, if you're in school, try to make the idea of graduating as least a detail in your growth as possible. Graduating means nothing. Whatever you were working on the day after graduation If you don't keep on it, it will always be a deficit, and you'll mistake it as a lack of talent. Sometimes it's a lack of access because you didn't mind your P's and Q's. There is stuff that has to be learned, not because you're a good boy or a bad boy, or a good girl or a bad boy, a good girl or a bad girl. You have to learn it because otherwise you're never going to have any fun playing music. You want to play on changes? Great. Leave yourself 10 years, because if you expect it after 2, you're just going to disappoint yourself for the next 8. Now, how do you support yourself when you realize the reality of what training for music is? That's the space. This book is all about that. If you practice loving yourself for no reason, you have a lot better chance of hanging in there with the things you want to add to who you are. Because contrary to popular belief, it's not being discontent with who you are that leads you to learn more. Contentment provides a basis where you can study something and not be in a hurry, because until you learn that, you're not a valuable soul. But if you're a valuable soul, you don't need to learn it. That's the best way to approach it. It really stands everything on its head, and I've seen it work time and time again. To my great joy, see, these days, as Peter and a lot of musicians here know, there's much less playing, but a whole lot of teaching. And what happened somewhere in the middle of that Zoom teaching, my acts became teaching. I get as high off of seeing the veil lifted from people as I used to get off a good solo. I don't care about a good solo at all, which incidentally is why I always play one. Even a bad solo is a good solo. But I really enjoy seeing someone else join in this reality about them. There's no way that you can't get high off of music right now. Do this, right? Wow. And that might be a good place to leave it, Vivian.
I have a lot of fire trucks behind me, but maybe you could read something from the book.
Okay.
I was thinking
great.
maybe you have
What are you
a
thinking?
preference yourself. I was thinking about the chapter on Maya.
Oh, all right.
Maybe not the whole chapter, but a little bit.
Wow. Well, it's not a lot of language there. It's just kind of list, right? Well, here's about the space. Some call it the superconscious mind. Some call it universal mind. Every culture and religion have a name for this part of their awareness. Neuroscientists are discovering more and more how it actually works. It is how many feel in communion with God. And I used a non-denominational term, the space. From the space, there is great compassion and great love, as well as great detachment. A person becomes a supreme enjoyer, observer, and doer. His involvement in life is total. He fully participates in the world, yet is not ensnared by it. There is no fear because he is not attached to the results of his actions. Practice takes no patience since there is no burning need to reach the goal. There is simply the celebration of the doing, the learning, the achieving, and the enjoying. To be sure, he experiences the entire range of emotions, but is not attached. Therefore, he can live his life and make his moves in harmony with his inner self and his outer universe. He frequently receives intuition about what to do next, and he follows it fearlessly. Paradoxically, detachment causes his actions to have great purpose and result in great success. The abundance of the universe tends to rain on such a person. However, if it does not, that too is all right. And I'm just going to, now you got me into another thing. Here's something on the perfect instrument. And I'm just doing that. Becoming the instrument means programming the perfect motion while programming the mind to be free of desire to hit the bullseye. That requires cultivating a great spiritual attribute of detachment. I just happened to hit the same thing. The different components I referred to before can all be practiced separately. They are separate issues, but at many points interdependent. For example, as stated before, one could not even cultivate the right level of practice without some degree of self-control, actually self-mind control. One's practice can lead to having the bullseye experience or the ultimate gig experience more reliably. There are two very important benefits to creating the perfect instrument. Both benefits require a withdrawal from conscious thought. One is physical. Without the mind's desire to become good at something, the body is free to take whatever time it needs to really adapt to the act. The other is removing the mental patterns and blocks that stand in the way of what wants to happen. We'll be exploring that in several ways. I just realized one more thing I want to read. It's towards the back. It's called, where is it? Meet God. Isn't it something like that? Yeah, where is that? Meeting God or some epilogue. What's this one? Meet God. Okay, this is good. All right. One day I was walking through the Muir Woods in Northern California. The redwoods are so huge that they often block sunlight as you walk among them. But as I walked, I reached a clearing where the sun was shining on one particular tree in the clearing. Because of the sunlight, this one tree appeared to have silver leaves. There were dust particles around the tree, and because of the sunlight, they were shimmering. If I were a pre-science man and had seen this tree brimming with light, I might have dropped to the ground and worshiped it. Because of my so-called ignorance, I would have had a transcendent experience. Another time I was on a conference call, which I took sitting in my backyard. It was a cool day in June with a lot of wind. I have big trees in my backyard and I watched them dance while on the call. It was cloudy and nature was a bit violent that day. On the call, someone recited a prayer, and just as they did, the sun peeked out from the clouds right above the trees. If I didn't understand fundamental things like sky, clouds, and wind, etc., I would have thought that God revealed himself as that prayer was spoken. The question is whether that isn't, in fact, the truth. How we harmonize with our environment is what can be understood as raw, non-dogmatic spirituality. It goes very much to the point of whether life is a series of ordinary or extraordinary moments. It's up to us. Was early man simply unaware of science, or did he see things in proper perspective? Maybe that is seeing things as they really are. Perhaps the small miracles happen every day with unseen synchronicity. On a hot, muggy day, one might have the tender thought and suddenly feel a slightest cool breeze, perhaps a spirit saying, go with it. You think you've heard the answer to a question on the inside, and the trees suddenly move with the wind. Previously, they lay dormant. Maybe trees were excited about the answer. Which view is correct? More to the point, which would create a life of wonder?
Thank you, Kenny.
So there you go.
I think we have to conclude with a song on the piano.
Oh, with a song.
And
You don't mean my Christmas song, right?
no Christmas song,
Okay.
just something like you always do. And I want to thank you all for coming to this party. We're very excited to see you all again and keep on connecting with us. Don't hesitate to ever email us to, with whatever. We love to hear from you. And I will put the download link in the chat so you can have those meditations.
Okay. Here we go. Ha. Miles. Huh. Ah. Huh. Woo. Ah. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful.